Welcome to Bread and Butter, everybody, the Hearthstone podcast where we talk about the basics of Hearthstone and how you can improve your fundamentals. This week, we have a returning special guest, Edelweiss. Edelweiss, how have you been?
Been doing all right. Been a little stressed with this cosplay I'm working on, but otherwise doing well.
What is this cosplay you talk about?
It's sort of generic Frost Death Knight, but based off of an artwork that I found on the Wowpedia page for Death Knights. And
Nice.
I might have bit off a little more than I can chew using some materials that I've never used before, but at this point I bought all the stuff, so I've got to submit something.
Oh, this is for the Hearthstone contest.
It is.
Fantastic. Now, so you said you bit off more you can chew. You're using materials you never used, so you've cosplayed before?
Yeah, but like on a basic level, or sometimes even, buying the stuff. But this is the first time I'm really diving in with like all the foam and priming and painting and all that kind of stuff. Especially this weird foam clay I've been using is very strange.
So it's not Arthas. It's a different Death Knight, kind of just like a random.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. I can dig it. That sounds very exciting. Doc, what have you been up to lately?
Working way too much. I say that, and so yesterday was day 3 of the 2 of the pay period, and I already had like 30 hours. And the week before I had 20 hours of overtime. Holiday season's very, very busy for bakers because everyone's wanting rolls or like specialty breads and all that kind of stuff. So I've been doing a lot of that. But I did manage to ding 70 in WoW today, which felt really good.
What are you playing?
Also, Dragonflight, so much fun. It already feels so much better than Shadowlands did to me at this point. But I have been playing Hearthstone. I've been watching Worlds. There's been some crazy stuff happening at Worlds this year. Like Bunny Hopper going 0-3 in round 1 in groups, which
He
did
got
not
out,
expect to
though.
see that happen.
He got out of the group. It's okay.
He did.
He gigafinned his way out. It was.
Oh, that was a play. That was a play. Because that was against a I believe a priest, right? That was against a buff priest, I think. They had the crazy board with Pelagos and all that.
I think it was a Miracle Rogue, but all the same difference. An absurd board was made early, and it got gigafinned.
So I think it's funny when you say that about the Shadowlands, though, Doc, because I think a lot of people say that. However, everyone liked Shadowlands when it came out. We have recency bias there. Like, the first month of Shadowlands was fantastic, and COVID kind of killed a lot of it and all that, but the storytelling that was done right off the bat, everyone was, like, all into, and then then you hit how long it took to get through everything, and then the delays and patches and all that, and then people are like, oh, Shadowlands sucked. It's like, no, you liked it at first. Just like WoD, just like whatever.
So, admittedly, I did enjoy Shadowlands at first, but I'm already better geared for Dragonflight than I was in Shadowlands, and I played Shadowlands for 3 months before stopping.
I love the story that they told with you, Sarah, when you were catching her back up. They had a play over in the Night Fae area, and they're just kind of being the silly Night Fae and talking about the different plot points, and Sarah's like, oh God, like, really? This is what happened? But anyway, I've been playing lots of Hearthstone and struggling. I have found that I have a hole in my game. I don't know what it is. I'm looking forward to my Coin Concede coaching next week with Hat to try to figure out what this hole is and plug it, because last month it took me to the very last day to get Legend, and I did that on the second, or it was the Wednesday after the WoW patch launched, and I was so determined that I was not going to not make Legend that month that I didn't play WoW on that day, and I wanted to, but I'm like, no, hell no, we're going to get there. And it's the same thing this month. I get to D5, and then it's just the rails come off, like adding Smarms to Blizzlet. It's just not going to happen. You can't figure it out. And I've been bouncing from decks trying to find the right one. That's usually what happens. I bounce from deck to deck to deck until I find one that clicks. But it's been like I find a deck that clicks, I get up to D3, D2, and then I fall back down. again. So we're gonna figure it out. I think I think I'm doing something fundamentally wrong somewhere. Maybe I'm not. I don't know what it is. We're gonna figure it out because that's how we get better. And aside from that, I've been playing the WoW. You know, the weird thing with Warcraft is I took a break from it, and then when I took that break at the end of the expansion, I started streaming, I started podcasting, I started content creation, and then WoW was coming back, and I run a raiding guild. So then it's like, well, now how do I fit this into my life with all this other stuff now? And the way I've done it was I'm not no lifing it. I'm still doing my Friday night streams with Civilization that I do with my buddy. Monday I started playing Hades for the first time, and I'm getting into that because apparently Hades 2 is coming out. So I was like, I guess I really should play Hades. I never did because I was always told that the PC controllers weren't great. I don't usually play these games on the consoles, but people are like, no, it's actually really good. So I'm having fun with it. It's an interesting story. We'll figure it out. I'm working on the 13th area. I don't want to say anything because people haven't got there yet. It's been fun. I'm excited for that. I have a project that I'm coming up that I'm working with Dragon Rider on. Can't talk about it yet because it's a secret, but very excited about that. It's been a lot of fun, a lot of stuff going on, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about Death Knight tonight. And Death Knight has been released a couple weeks ago now, and Edelweiss is here to talk about Death Knights and specifically building decks with Death Knights because that's a brand new, unique challenge. But before you get to the deck building, Edelweiss, Death Knight, is it good or is it bad?
So it feels like Death Knight has a lot of good cards and just not really any good decks. There's some talk that a 40 card Frost DK might be there. Superior David has a list. It's very tuned to the like top 200 meta, but he was doing well with it. Claims that it has a shot against some of the best things like Quest, Demon Hunter, and even pretty good against like your rogues and priests as well because of the freeze mechanics. But I think when it comes to like Blood Decay, there's just not the right things for it to control, and then Unholy has felt like it just can't really be fast enough, honestly, and isn't able to deal with some of the crazy things that other decks are doing. So I'm not even really sure that that Death Knight is bad as much as just the things that other decks are doing do not line up well at all.
And I can definitely feel that when get a little ahead of ourselves. We had a little deck building challenge, and we'll talk about that later. But I had decided to go full Frost because I like Death Whisper and a couple of the other cards. And I'm curious, well, how close my list is to David's. Probably quite a bit off, I'm sure. But I was trying to build something that would work in the meta. The deck feels really good, except I kept running into the Blood Death Knights, and the deck is really, and so this was a couple weeks ago or whatever it was, a week and a half ago, and the deck feels very powerful, but you can't really get people down from 70-80 health, which is something you kind of have to deal with now, and it's kind of bonkers. But and surprisingly, Daniel likes this meta. So for those that don't know, Storm Rage really doesn't like Renathal. Hates it. 40 card health, hates it. But he says he's playing a lot right now, and you have cards that bring you up to 70, 80 health in some of these decks, so I'm a little surprised about that.
So I will say the meta at like Legend, especially top 1 or 2K Legend, is pretty substantially different from the place where there are still Blood Death Knights. We don't really see many of those because they tend to get murdered by Quest, Demon Hunter, or Death Rattle Rogue. I think the Vicious Syndicate Blood DK they have is forced to run double Starfish because otherwise you just can't deal with Rogue. And I'm not even sure how much that helps at this point now that there's the Jombre list that just like powers out early Neptulons or Gravitons.
I really like that deck. So I started playing the Death Rattle Rogue deck, and that's one of those decks that I started to climb with and then failed because like I went really hard into it. It was fun. I loved it because it really dumpsters Ramp Druid, and I it felt good having fun. And then came the Starfish. Starfish just is sad. Doc, how much Death Knight have you played so far?
So I tried Unholy. I haven't tried Blood Death Knight yet, which I should, so I can complete my like event quests. I've tried Frost like twice, but Unholy to me felt like where I was having the most fun. But it just never got there. Like I had one game where I was like gonna get a really big, I forget the name of the legendary, but it was the legendary with having to do with like the excess corpses.
Lord Marrowgar.
Yep. Got Theotard. Literally the turn right before I was going to play it. And so that was just escape, leave the game, queue up Death Rattle Rogue, and then I proceeded to run people over till I got to Plat 10. And then games started to get a little real at Plat 10 for me. So, but like, I think Death Knight is fun. It just doesn't have a great way, seemingly doesn't have a great way to like finish a game. Like, it has good things to do, but its lethality is a problem.
Yeah, I think that, especially with something like Blood Death Knight, Mograine has been a lot more important than I expected. I thought he would just end up being bad, but you need it in the list just to actually be able to pressure. And Astalor goes a long way, but of course that's a neutral legendary.
On a side note, Doc, I press streaming instead of recording on OBS, so we have the audacity, and we're going from there. On a thought though, we've been talking about Blood, we've been talking about Frost, we're talking about Unholy, but that sounds like we're all invested in all those. Like, what happened to hybrids?
So I think it's easier to visualize building for the triples because you go all in on what that particular color, that particular rune is trying to do. They synergize very well with themselves, and you can see sort of the play style that's intended for the triple cards. Frostworm's Fury very much is like, yeah, you freeze their stuff and you go face. Alexandros Mograine, you want more turns because then he'll get more procs. I tried to make a triple rune more aggressive deck, and it's like, well, Mograine is the only triple, so why am I even playing triple blood then? Vampiric blood and I forget what it's called, but the Twisting Nether on a 5/5 are all the other triple blood cards, so that screams control, right? And then Unholy, it's got a Bloodlust, right? Grave Strength and Lord Marrowgar, right? So you want to make a bunch of guys, make a bunch of corpses. So it's a lot more obvious what to do with the triple runes than it is with some of the combinations where you're dipping in for something. And the only really obvious archetype to me besides was sort of the 2 blood, 1 unholy, where the unholy for me was really just for the Nerubian that summons 2 copies of itself. So when you blood tap and buff all your stuff, you play this thing and it's a board in a box, right? It summons 2 copies of itself, so you're multiplying the buffs. But otherwise, it's sort of like, okay, well, if you cut 1 Frost rune, you lose access to Fury. What are you putting in? Are you going to put in Unholy for more corpses? The main reason to do that is another triple Frost card. So
it's almost like we need cards that require a mix of runes in order for those archetypes to kind of go forward. Like hey, we have this is 2 frost, 1 blood, and cards that like you build towards that actually take advantage of split ruining to kind of guide you in a direction maybe.
I'm not sure if they'll ever do that. It's certainly something they could, but I think in a way they almost do that just by making cards that go for a particular sort of play pattern where they sort of show you, hey, look, this card, like, you only need 1 unholy to play these cards, and they go well with this hand buffing thing. Oh, and the hand buffing stuff is double blood. So, like, that kind of showed you what you might want to put in the double blood 1 unholy deck. But I don't think there were a lot of other things they did that for, at least so far.
What do you think needs to be adjusted to bring, with the current cards we have? Obviously, we can get something in the mini set, but what do you think they could do now in the next balance patch to help bring Death Knight more in line with some of the other decks we're seeing?
I think a lot of it, especially for Frost, has to do more with bringing the other decks down. Because, I don't know about you, maybe you're not seeing a bunch of these, but Quest Demon Hunter kills people on 6, like, with regularity. It can still draw its deck and win even if you take away Jace, which is kind of insane. Sometimes you intentionally burn the quest reward because it takes up hand space. Like, it's just all about these discounts and getting, +2 to +6 spell damage and duplicating that onto Fel Barrage. And the damage you can output is just so absurd. So I think the gimme is sort of, is it Fel Scream? No, not Fel Scream Blast.
Fel Breaks Loose.
Unleash Fel.
Unleash Fel.
Yeah. That one probably needs to go to 2 at minimum. Probably something else as well.
Maybe also not go face. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. But a lot of times it's just to, clear the board, full heal, or clear the board to pave the way for your Fel Barrages to just go face. So,
do you think that maybe we were just talking about how some things are triple rune? Do you think that maybe making with Frostwind's Fury double instead of triple or something like that could go away to giving you more options?
I am very curious to see what things they'll do to mess with Death Knight. I mean, they have a ton of balancing tools they can adjust. In terms of how many corpses cards cost, how many runes. Rune changes, I feel like, are the biggest thing they could possibly do. Like, if they set Marrow something, the triple frost card that does 2 damage for each corpse, and it can do up to 5 corpses. If that went from 3 to 2, that would be massive, because then you could put Unholy in your deck and you actually have a way of getting a bunch of corpses. So I don't know if they'll hit that lever yet, but they might affect how many corpses certain things cost. Like, Grave Strength currently costs 5 corpses. Maybe they set that to 4 or 3.
Yeah, the amount of corpses is definitely an interesting point. One thing they did add that I don't know if everyone knows is initially you don't have a corpse counter if you're another class, but you still now accumulate corpses. So if you happen to Theotar something, you have a corpse counter that you don't know about, but it's not going to just whiff. You will have something that will activate if you have those. I'm assuming your cards go orange or whatever available, but we're going to talk more about Death Knight in a minute. But what are our thoughts, Doc? What have you been seeing on the old ladder lately? What have you been thinking of the meta?
So I've been seeing a lot of Priest and Demon Hunter. Like, I am enjoying this meta. It's just like Edel said, Demon Hunter kills very quickly, very regularly. Miracle Rogue you just need male dance, the dancer, Draka, and the bounce. I forget what the name is right now.
Shadow Step.
Shadow Step.
Yes, yes. And then boom, turn 2, turn 3, you can have like a 15-16 like attack weapon, and what can really anyone do with that? Like there's a lot of really strong, crazy stuff happening right now for a lot of different classes. But I've been enjoying Death Rattle Rogue the most. I'm just like 1 or 2 like key legendaries away from a lot of decks right now, and it's really frustrating because I don't have any dust. So I've been playing like Unholy and Death Rattle Rogue, but all in all, I enjoy this meta. It's just, it feels like almost every class has a very polarizing deck that's available to them.
Yeah.
How about yourself, Edel? What have you been seeing up in the, I'm assuming, top 200 meta?
Yeah. Oh no, I'm not there right now. I was messing around with Blood Death Knight for a little too long, but I have seen basically a lot of that Quest Demon Hunter we mentioned. There's also Blessed Priest is a thing that I have to deal with sometimes, and that deck often pops off around turn 5, makes some pretty absurdly large Radiant and then Boon of Ascendant. And then on the flip side, there's, Plague Spreader Priest, which is kind of got a place just in terms of countering the other stuff, right? It has damage agnostic removal for dealing with your Miracle Rogues or your Boon Priests. And I don't think it does great against the Demon Hunter, but it at least has the potential to transform their spell damage things with Plague Spreader. You got Theatar, Mutinous, just like all of the disruption stuff. And, obviously it is a class with healing. So, yeah, it's kind of a weird, weird spot right now. A ton of other decks are still fine as well in terms of like Evolve Shaman or Spooky Mage, honestly. Big Spell Mage, I think because it has a disruption element, is also relevant, but I think people aren't as excited about some of these things that feel older or don't have the insane pop-offs that other decks have.
I've been enjoying the Big Shaman out there. I believe it's a Kibler deck. It's a lot of fun. It's not consistent, but it's a lot of fun. I enjoy the Pure Paladin list. That's been a lot of fun.
Yes, that is a very fun one.
And it's a little weird. It doesn't run Cariel, but you can get some really nice pop-off turns early if you can get those +3/+3 Divine Shield, deal 3 damage to your hero. You get that on the light dude, and something else, and you can get a pretty big board pretty quick if it all goes well. There's a lot out there, but yeah, it's been so. I guess that brings us to the question. I know some people get kind of frustrated with the meta we're talking about. People always get frustrated with the meta when there's a few good decks, but I don't think we're solved yet. Do you guys think we're solved with this meta? Do we have it all figured out, or are we waiting for balance patches, or are we still innovating?
So I feel like tier 1 is pretty solved, but I think there's a lot of stuff that's like right around that tier 2 or almost tier 2 that's kind of still getting development or being worked out. And I expect that after Worlds, they will do some kind of balance on Tuesday because they really wanted Death Knight to be played and it wasn't. So I think they'll want it to be played. I mean, yeah, Rogues did a little Death Knight cosplay, but apart from that, the class itself did not show up, and I suspect they'll want it to, still be something people want to do over the upcoming break.
I wonder if they'll factor that small window in next year, because we're still waiting on the next announcement for esports. I wonder if they will try to make Worlds later, or to give them more time to get a meta in a place where they want it before these things happen. Because obviously, yeah, you're right. They would have wanted to have this be Death Knight v Death Knight. If they could have had a specialist format with Death Knights as a mandatory class, they probably would have done it. But they didn't, and we're waiting. And now we're in that weird window. Is we could get a patch next week, or we might not, because, well, it's the holidays and they don't want to break. We've gotten these patches fast at these times, but we also know that they're skeptical. So I bet you we're going to, when we get the patch notes on Tuesday, if we do in fact get them, we're going to see the words high confidence a lot in those patch notes, because
Maybe
I would just think so, because I don't think they'd want to. I don't think we're gonna get a 1 mana reduction on Edwin again right before they go on vacation.
I don't know. Could be an interesting.
I mean,
Interesting few
honestly,
weeks.
at this point, I would kind of welcome some random thing to shake it up for like a week, to hopefully like bring Death Knight up a little bit and bring like some of the other stuff down. Because like Death Knight compared to like Rogue and Demon Hunter, the disparity in power level is so atrocious right now. Like, I would be okay with them doing something that maybe they're not like 100% confident in, that would make a big enough change to move things.
Oh, I hope,
Because at least it would give them room to breathe.
I think they want to, and I think they would. I just don't think they want to do it before they're all on vacation. That's all.
It's what?
Look.
It's what, a week and a half?
Look, if Grave Strength goes from costing 5 corpses to 3 corpses, they'll be fast games. It'll be fine.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't think I've ever, with the amount of Death Knight I've played, I don't think I've ever been corpse starved. Like, it's been rare when I've been like, I can't do what I want to do because I have the corpse. But I've been mostly focused on Frost. So,
Yeah, Triple Unholy makes a lot of corpses, but it also uses a lot of corpses. And Grave Strength costing 4 mana but 5 corpses definitely comes up, because another one of your board generators uses 5 corpses to make the 2/2s. So like, sometimes you've just made your board and you don't quite have the corpses left to then do your Bloodlust.
that's fair. I actually haven't seen that deck very often. I've seen plenty of blood. I've seen plenty of other things. I have not seen. In fact, the card that you were talking about, the Nerubian, that's the 2/4, pop out 2 more of those or whatever it is. The border
That's
box.
a different one, but
I saw that for the first time. The game I played right before this, the podcast. I have not seen that at all. I have just. So.
yeah, there's a 2/4 with Reborn that uses 5 corpses to summon a copy of itself, and then there is, and that's just Death Knight generally. It can be in anything, and then there's a 4 mana 1/3 taunt that Battlecry summons 2 copies of itself, and so those are good hand buff recipients for blood tap, and then there's a couple minions in Death Knight that buff the attack. And yeah, it can do some powerful stuff. It's just not fast enough, nor does it really have quite the right tools to remove some of the things that like Priest or Rogue are doing.
And this is way more meta than we usually get. We usually try to keep this moderately agnostic, because we try to focus on other things. But I think given that it's a new meta, it's interesting. Do you think there's... So let's say they... Balancing, even you have the classes right now. You have Rogue that's really powerful. You have Demon Hunter that's really powerful. You said Priest. So usually when you think about these classes, you think, oh, we need to nerf X, Y, and Z. But you also have to factor in what becomes powerful when these other decks are holding back, get a chance to shine. Are there any decks that, if they start nerfing these, that you're worried about as potentially becoming overbearing or oppressive?
I mean, I'm always worried about Ramp Druid. I don't know that if I should be, but it is a popular thing, and it's a thing that feels really bad to lose to, especially this Astalor combo.
Mm-hmm. It is the worst. Especially when it's like turn 6 and it's like a Nubricon brand, blah blah blah, and you're just like, okay, I guess I don't get to play. And so you logically, it is not a great deck. It is like a tier 3 deck, I guess, or along those lines. Maybe it's tier 2, but it doesn't matter. It just, when you see it and you start losing to it, that's where, like I said, the appeal of Death Rattle Rogue came in, because it just completely obliterates them, and that just feels so good. Be like, all right, yeah, you almost want to see them not be playing the aggro version, because as soon as you see like something that indicates this ramp trade, you're like, all right, I'm great. All right, any other final thoughts on the meta before we move on, Doc? How about yourself, Edel?
Yeah, all good.
Right. So the main topic of this week is building decks with Death Knights and building decks for Death Knights. And one of the things we did was we took the opportunity to Doc, I know you were going to, but then I think you got kind of pulled into work too much to do much of this. So we tried to build a deck. I tried to build a deck without any help or any template, and just to see what I could make. I gave the results to Edel. I then made a couple different refinements. And so just as kind of an experiment for this about deck building and what went right, what went wrong, and maybe like, hey, you made some dumb decisions here, don't do that. Or this was a good idea, or, whatever. So we'll get to that in a little bit. But Edel, tell us about Death Knights and what we should think about when building Death Knight decks.
I think the most important thing with building Death Knight decks is you want to start with like a reason for the runes that you're using. So it becomes very easy when you're doing triples, because your triple rune cards are the reason that you're doing all 3 runes, right? In blood, that means you've got Vampiric, you've got the board clear, and you've got Alexandros Mograine, right? So those 5 cards are like definitely in there, and they're very powerful, right? Getting 10 life drawing a card, pretty insane effect. Being able to clear the board, get a bunch of corpses, and have a 5/5, very, very good effect. And so that leans you towards control because of how those cards play out. Similarly, in Frostworm's Fury, freeze their whole board, make a 5/5. So if you go face with it and you get to connect with that 5/5, that's 10 damage. It's very much like keep them from doing anything with a board while you just hit them in the face. You chip away until you just do some burst. It has a lot of draw in terms of just Defrost, Harbinger of Winter, and your triple cards are that Frostworm's Fury and Lady Death Whisper, which copies the frost spells in your hand when it dies. And then also Marrow Manipulator, and that's one that I think kind of departs a bit from the other triple frost cards because it requires corpses, so you almost need to build around the Marrow Manipulator to really have enough corpses to fuel it. I don't know, maybe your experiences have been different, but I feel like you don't necessarily get too many corpses in Frost, and you spend them on your card draw into Frost, so there's often like not a lot left for Marrow Manipulator. Maybe having 1 works, but having 2
and Marrow
is usually
Marrow Manipulator is what? It's the 6 mana, I think 5/5 cast, do 2 damage to a random enemy for each corpse, and you need 6 of them.
It can eat up to 5.
Okay,
yeah.
5.
So it can do, if they have an empty board, 10 damage. So very powerful effect. But you need a lot of corpses to really fuel it. And another thing I found was that if you are figuring you're going to freeze your opponent's board, then that means they have minions that can soak up that damage. So it's it's not always as good as it seems unless, you're trying to clear minions in play, which sometimes you are.
Yeah, that's something I always
But
felt playing it. I never felt I felt like I held onto it too long because I just never wanted to. I never felt like I was going to get value out of it. And when sometimes you'd play it and the damage would disperse between everything and nothing would die, and it felt bad.
right. Yeah. But then going over to triple unholy, Lord Marigar, and Grave Strength. So, you want to build a wide board and then, play your Grave Strength. Just have a big damage turn. Basically Bloodlust Shaman, right? And it has a lot of stuff to make that redundant. It can build boards over and over again. But when you're trying to mix runes, kind of like we were talking about before, or when you're taking away and so losing access to those triple cards, you really, I think, need a reason for why you're doing that. We saw in the theory crafting where they had to do that and do pieces, right? Double frost but one blood, double frost but one unholy, right? Something like that. Well, Patchwork was the main blood card that got used in that situation, because Patchwork is very versatile, right? It's a disruption tool, it's a removal tool, and then I believe the other thing used was the 1 mana 1/2 that deals 2 to yourself and something else. So those are very flexible cards, and often the single rune things are more flexible. Maybe you choose as a aggressive board-based unholy deck to add frost because you want card draw. So you get access to defrost if you do that. And it's a thing that uses corpses. So that would be your reason there for dipping into frost. Maybe you can use Thessarian as well. But I think a lot of times you're going to be guided by your double rune cards, because the more runes that something in Death Knight has, the more it kind of guides you towards a strategy. And the most obvious I talked about a bunch earlier is Blood Tap, where it's double blood, and so it's this hand buffing thing. There are a couple other hand buffing cards in blood, but you need at least 2, and then Unholy is really the only thing that has good recipient minions, and maybe there will be more of those over time. But right now, there's no aggressive triple blood cards, so there's no reason to play a triple blood aggressive deck. Like kind of Mograine, but Mograine is more effective the more turns that the game goes. I think that is like my biggest overarching takeaway, and sort of the reason why currently single rune of each just isn't a thing, right? Rainbow Death Knight, and they said as much, that on release they didn't have plans for one of each rune to really be viable, and that very much was discovered.
Yeah, but
you just have.
It sounds fun though. Like you want to kind of pull it all.
It just has the flexible cards of each color, because that's what the one rune things are meant for. Is those are your splash cards, and they're not meant to be powerhouses in and of themselves. And probably if there's ever a point where you can do one of each rune, maybe something's a little wrong there if the flexible cards are powerful enough to finish. I think when I was building all kinds of Death Knight decks for release, there were a few combinations, and especially the one of each, that really just devolved into, well, this runs a bunch of stuff and Denathrius. And now that Denathrius has been nerfed, that's even less viable. Like, you can kind of do Bran Astalor for a win condition. But just like discovering spells for the sake of hitting powerful cards outside of your rune combination isn't a reason to play a certain combination.
And I think that's why they hesitated so long to nerf Denathrius, is because I think Denathrius fueled a lot of the Death Knight win conditions. And by having to nerf that for fields more than anything, I think that they have stunted the growth of Death Knight, because that was a win condition, especially in like Blood and Unholy.
Yeah, I think it was doing more for, honestly, Druid than anything else, but it had very clear synergy with the Death Knight class because of the hero power and because you already want things to die so you can get corpses, etc. I also think it's kind of a bummer. I think the biggest bummer for me was I thought that the Corpse Explosion patron synergy was really, really cool for kind of having an almost combo-like win condition for Triple Blood, where you could do this turn with Frenzied Patron and Corpse Explosion, and then suddenly your Denathrius did 56 damage. Now that doesn't work for multiple reasons, but one of them being the Denathrius nerf.
Yeah, I hadn't seen that combo, but then I saw that they had disabled disgruntled patron, whatever it was, for a day or half a day, because they just didn't want that interaction at all.
The animations were quite long.
I can definitely see that. And one thing that I don't think most of us know, but like Patchwork does have some hidden text on it that says discard your combo pieces when played. Because it never seems to miss. It's very tilting. I was kind of expecting a rainbow deck to emerge, not based on the rainbow cards themselves, but I was kind of expecting to find some synergy with a neutral. There's always somebody like Marky Mark or whoever. They'll find something that works with the combinations of things. And I thought that they were like, it's not going to be a deck. It's kind of too weak. But there was just going to be some combo that somebody found with some random unplayable neutral that then powered the engine.
I think the most played and sort of win condition-y neutral right now is Astalor, particularly when you can, with 10 mana, go Bran, Astalor, and now you've got, 2 copies of the final stage, and another way of getting it. Like, that's just so much fuel in two cards.
And we definitely went there with the deck building kind of challenge. So do we have any other, before we talk about that, any other thoughts on building with Death Knights, or I think that we'll talk about it when we go over the decks I made, but you highlighted a little bit where I think a key a key trap is to go full rune and then just play all the full rune cards. Because like we were saying, you're like, I'm going to triple rune, give me all those triple rune cards. Yeah, baby. But I think that, there's some, and even though they look like there's synergy, there's some anti-synergy there as well. So you really got to understand how these cards work.
Yeah, and it depends on, the deck, right? Like the Triple Blood Death Knight stuff all works great together. I just found that didn't quite translate for Frost. And then in Unholy, you've got Stitch Giant, which is a big card. Now that's only double Unholy, but then the go wide stuff in Grave Strength, that's triple. So I've wondered if maybe there'll be a like double Unholy single Frost at some point that focuses more on like getting Stitch Giants down. And then you win with like Battlemaster. That is, again, you let the runes sort of guide you in terms of, how are you going to build stuff? What's your reason for having these different things?
Fair. All right, so let's talk about the decks I made. So the first thing I did, I just decided to go all Frost because that sounded the most fun to me. I used to primarily play a lot of Mage, freezing stuff sounds fun. The cards I really like when you can you get some generation, you get some card generation, you get some duplication with the Lady Death Whisper, And I like when you can pop off with is it Howling Blast, where it's 4 damage, reduce the next spell by 3, I think.
That one is Glacial Advance.
Glacial Advance. That is a fun card, especially when you can get multiple ones of them. It's nice to just start jamming them up. So I did the thing in the first iteration of the deck, whereas I just grabbed all the triple Frost Rune cards. I can post these lists somewhere. I don't think we've ever posted show notes, Doc, but we'll have to figure that out, I think, at some point. I mean, it was just pretty much, is it a Frost card? It went in the deck. So this is kind of a really basic place to start. So any thoughts on this first iteration of the deck that I have here?
I mean, this was basically the first place I went when I was building for Triple Frost as well. It kind of was... Yeah, exactly. If it's Frost, it goes in the deck. I think the only difference is I had Queen Azshara, because then you can get an extra copy of Frostworm's Fury. And yeah, it's just all in on the Frost. And I don't know if this was quite the problem you had, but I found that I just had to spend a lot of my Frost stuff to stay alive.
Mm-hmm.
And then either I wouldn't have enough to finish them off and would have taken too much damage and end up dying anyway. Or they just like get enough damage in that that even though I have this burst, it's just like isn't quite enough before I was able to get whittled down.
Right. I had the same issue. I was 0 for 5 with this version of the deck. I think part of it was pilot error, because I hadn't played Death Knight at all when I came into this, and I had some games that were close, but it was just it didn't feel like there was enough there. I felt, again, this was pre-nerf Denathrius, and I was running into a lot of I think I ran into at least 3 or 4 of the Blood Death Knights with the Denathrius finisher, and it felt bad. So then I came in and I made some adjustments, and let's see what I added. I added a Thalanos just to get a little bit more oomph out of some of my spells. I thought that would be useful, and some more cycle. I added Astalor because I needed some. I felt like I didn't have finishing power, and I thought that maybe that could help. I think, was that all I added? I added the Frostbreakers, I think. No. I'm sorry. I added Slither Spears, because I thought that perhaps that might be helpful to just get some early momentum going instead of waiting to the end to just die instead of killing them. I thought maybe if I could get some of my early spells going on top of a Slither Spear, that could be helpful. It actually helped out quite a bit. I started up. So with the first iteration, I was 0 for something, and then I started to really like playing this deck, and I did really well with it at first. That I came back to earth after a while, but I went 13 games. I had a 70% win rate. So then I thought I had this deck building thing figured out. I was wrong.
Yeah, and I think that a Slither Spear was a very good idea, because if you're going to have to be using some of your spells to remove their stuff anyway, well, it's great to then have a minion where you are still capitalizing on that to get in some chip damage, etc. Astalor, I just think, is a solid card. It's in so many decks, both because if you're controlling, you're definitely going to get to 10 mana and do that last phase, but even if you're not, it's very small investment. It's only a 2 mana card for deal 2 to something. That's fine. And then sometimes you need that armor and the 5/5. Sometimes you don't even get the mana thirst effects. It's just like you want stuff to do on curve. So it's very flexible in that way. And I see you took out one of the Mara Manipulators, which I think was good for reasons we described. You often can't get enough corpses anyway. And Blood Mage Thalanos is always great when you both can take advantage of the card draw and the spell damage, of course.
And
you can.
It came up huge. Like, I remember it helped me hit some breakpoints on a lot of different cards, especially if you get it down where when you had a big pop off turn where you did a lot of the glacial advances, and it just seemed to make a big difference for that little bit of spell damage, which I think factored into some other decisions as they got on.
Yeah.
So
One
go ahead.
thing
I'm sorry.
I would
Go ahead.
say is that you have Frostmourne in these lists, and Frostmourne I think is a little tricky. It makes sense that they made it just Death Knight no runes because they wanted it to be accessible to any Death Knight, but in a lot of ways it's more of a blood card, or at least is more of a controlling card. And because blood is able to take the punishment of hitting minions with that weapon, even though it even then didn't make a lot of lists, I feel like it fits the best in blood, because blood is the most about sort of clearing the opponent's stuff and then counter pressuring, and Frostmourne is that you clear a few things and then you have this big swing turn where they all get summoned again, but you still have to be able to take the damage to kill the things. And if you want to kill anything that's really worth resummoning, then you have to be able to take some damage. And Frost Death Knight, I think, unfortunately, is just a little more glass cannon-y.
Mm-hmm. I like that about it. Like, I want to be able to burst people down from kind of out of nowhere. That's fun. But again, it was all the blood. It's hard to burst it was hard to burst someone down from 70 life. And then you get them down to about 35, or you're like 18. I mean, I had some of these matches where I got them almost all the way down, and then they would play that unnerfed Denathrius that would restore all their health and crush my dreams. So then we went. I hit up to D5. Like during this was all just basic climbing from wherever, and then I hit D5, and things weren't going so well with that deck anymore. My 70% win rate dropped. So I thought, hey, I have a lot of cards I want to play, but I don't know what to take out. And like, why do I have to take them out? I have this fantastic card called Prince Renathal. So I tried making a Renathal list, and with that, I added some Doomsayers because that felt like that would be really good with the Frostmourne's Fury. I added a couple Ice Revenants because, good minion that could take advantage of some of these. It was nerfed already before the thing came, but it felt like maybe that would still have some power. I added a Guild Trader and an Arcanist. Mostly, you probably want one or the other. I just kind of didn't know which one I wanted, so I picked one or the other because I thought maybe the trade would come in handy, or if I wasn't quite sure. I think that was it. Like, so yeah, we added the spell damage minions. We added Overseer. Was Overseer already? Yeah, it was there before. But the Ice Revenants, the spell damage, I added Rhymefang Sword, which is, I think that's the one that reduces spell cost by 1, which I thought would be useful. So what do you think about where we ended up going from here?
So I think XL was definitely the right direction. That fragility issue that I mentioned seems to be mitigated by 10 extra health, and given that Frost is the best equipped for drawing cards out of all of the runes, it can handle being 40 cards a bit better than some of the other rune combinations. So where I initially thought, oh, well, you don't want to dilute your deck, you want to just draw all your stuff and combo kill them, it kind of has to take things a little slower to build to those turns. I mean, Frostworm's Fury is a 7-mana card. So, a lot of the lists that have been seeing success have been 40 cards. Definitely on the right track there. And Frost also has just really good weapons. I mean, you've got Bonebreaker in here, you've got Rhymefang Sword. You don't have the one that spends corpses. People don't seem to be as high on that one, but I've used it, and being able to freeze 3 minions, hit them for 8, like that's pretty good. So yeah, I think when you're also going 40 cards, you can feel a little more comfortable putting more weapons in the deck because they're going to be spaced out, but it guarantees you that you're, or not guarantees, but makes it more likely that you at least find, a weapon to use. And weapons are great because you're an investment on one turn, but then you've got it over several turns. And Ramfang Sword really lets you build to some of those crazy pop-off combos. Spell damage, especially +2 spell damage, goes very well with a lot of the Frost cards. I think Howling Blast especially, right? You do 5 to something and 3 to everything else. So it really turns that into an actual clear because of you're turning that 1 AoE into a 3 AoE, which is a lot more useful. Similarly on the Remorseless Winter, right? Turning that from 2 damage to 4 damage, just making those effects more relevant. You can get a lot out of spell damage in XL. And I don't know about Doomsayer, because like your only thing that freezes the entire board is Frostworm's Fury. You kind of want your 5/5 to live. But I think experimenting with it makes a ton of sense, and there's probably turns where you can just Icy Touch something or Howling Blast, right? And make it at least a little challenging for them to kill the Doomsayer.
And it might go good with that weapon you were saying as well, early on.
Right. Yep.
So with this version of the deck, I started off, I didn't have great success, but then as I got more comfortable with it, and variance being what it is, I did have a nice 5-0 streak with it in one session. So I'm assuming that I should kind of compare this now with the Superior David list we were talking about, but overall, the progression, you think good choices based on like the things I was running into, or were there obvious mistakes that you saw?
No, I mean, I think you were definitely on the right track. I don't think Frostmourne quite belongs, and I do think that, again, Mera Manipulator just doesn't quite work with not having a ton of corpses, and I found that often it just would hit minions instead of going face anyway. So if you're trying to just like freeze out your opponent's stuff and then kill them with burn, it doesn't quite function there. But I think that you're definitely on the right track here. The major differences, I think, between your list and like Superior David's is he's got a lot more tech cards, basically, instead of any of the tempo things. So, he doesn't have any of the 1-drop minions. It's just like Watch Post, because there's things like Blessed Priest and Quest Demon Hunter that are trying to draw cards. And he's also got Finley, just so you can, flip your deck when you need to find particular answer. He's got discover things like Nerubian Vizier and Venomous Scorpid. So his is much more of like a controlling thing, but then builds to a combo finish. So there's 2 copies of Guild Trader. And the top end is really just the 2 copies of Frostworm's Fury and 1 Overseer Frigidara. Everything else is 4 mana or less.
And they say too, if you're still playing like Scorpid in the 6-set meta this far down the road, your class might not have everything it needs to.
Well, there is something to be said for how Death Knight interacts with these discover effects. The fact that you're able to discover cards outside of your rune combination breaks the rules a little bit, and so makes discovering spells kind of higher value. I don't think high enough value to run Vulpera Scoundrel.
I've seen a lot of those.
Yeah, I don't think that's quite worth it, but Nerubian Vizier is really good because what you get costs 2 less. Scorpid at least has poisonous, so it kills something. And then School Teacher, the limitation of only being spells that cost 3 or less is actually pretty beneficial because it makes you more likely to hit stuff like Vampiric Blood or the triple Unholy card that gives you 4 corpses and shuffle stuff in your deck. Like that
Grain,
is
Plague
Plague
Grain.
Grain. Yeah, like there's a lot of good hits in the cheap spells of Death Knight.
Well, let's check in on Doc, make sure he's not asleep. Doc, I feel kind of bad because I know you weren't able to participate in the deck building with work, but do you have any thoughts on Death Knights and building with any questions or anything?
They just need a little help. Like, they got stuff there. Like when I was running Unholy, it felt it was just like a turn or two too slow for me to get like the big Marigar payoff that I was trying to get. But like they have things they can do. It's just they're not quite as finely tuned as everything else. And like I understand Team 5 was coming from not wanting a repeat of Demon Hunter with Death Knight, and they certainly accomplished that for better or worse. But it's fun. It's just everything else can do what they can do better than Death Knight can do what Death Knight does. As unfortunate as that is, but I don't know. Like I haven't tried Frost. I haven't tried Blood yet. Like I've literally only tried Unholy. I've lost to a couple Unholy aggro with Death Rattle Rogue, but that's when I drew like double smoke screen and didn't have any, like couldn't react to anything. I want to play Death Knight, but it's not at a spot right now where I can justify how the games will make me feel for playing Death Knight.
The heart, what's what the heart wants there, Doc. If you like it, play it.
Yeah, and Frost Death Knight I think is really getting there, just because people have been developing. Vicious Syndicate has a list that's a little less teched than Superior David's, so more proactive with things like Death Chiller, which is, I call it Frost Waker because it's Flame Waker but with frost, and it's got Bone Lord Frost Whisper, which is the 6-mana 6/6 that when it dies, your next 3 turns you can play something for free. The first card you play is free, so that's sort of to set up for a big Guild Trader and then Frost turn, where you just kind of go all in on something crazy.
For the next 3 turns, your first spell is free. What's the downside of that?
Or first card.
First card.
Oh, the downside is at the end of 3 turns you die. Yeah. For the rest of the game, your first card each turn costs 0. You die in 3 turns. So, but if you're just gonna on the following turn go Guild Trader, and play a bunch of Glacial Advances and Howling Blasts,
I'm curious. Not that we'll ever
fine.
see this, but I wonder how that interaction will work if you happen to get a discovered copy of that into a wild quest mage that has the repeat your last turn or whatever it is as the quest reward. Would you still get all your turns, or would it?
Well, you'd have to treachery it over to them and then kill it. So you'd have to be playing Warlock. But yeah, I mean, so after 3 turns they would die, right?
I think that probably brings us to the end of Death Knight talk. Is there anything else you'd like to say about Death Knights before we move on? Anybody?
I just want Death Knight to be a little bit stronger. Because, like, it's really fun. Like, honestly, like, I enjoy when I play it, but I mean, granted, haven't played Frost. I'm going to play Frost because of how much you two have spoken of it.
I got a list for you.
I just want it to be just a skosh. Just bump it up a little bit. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if this next balance patch is relatively large, because there's a lot of stuff that's a little too good, and then they got to bring Death Knight up a little bit. So I don't know. I feel like it could be a big balance patch whenever it happens.
Well,
But I just want Death Knight to be fun to play all around.
last holiday season, they did 13 changes.
Is that the biggest we've had? Or pretty close?
Actually don't think it is, but it's up there. And I think it was the first time we had seen that many changes at once.
And then they were like, peace, we're out.
Right.
Let's do it again.
right.
Let everyone have a fun holiday season with some just crazy new meta.
And as we know, if we want to bring Jack Johnson back into the game, buffs, not nerfs.
Yeah, only buffs.
So, Edel, if you were to guess at any of the changes they are going to make, what guesses do you have for upcoming? I won't even say nerfs because it could be buffs or nerfs. What changes do you think they'll make?
I mean, I would figure something like Boon of the Ascended to 5 mana, Unleash Fell to 2 mana, and like Mana Thirst 5 or something. And potentially something to one of the spell damage cards as well, like Silver. I don't know. Maybe it even is that Unleash Fell just can't go face anymore. Maybe it only is kill minions and heal card. But those are pretty big outliers. There's also possibility they change Draka somehow, either to 5 mana or making the weapon only 2 durability.
That weapon could be 1 durability and would still be good.
I don't think that's quite. I think that's probably too much, but yeah, I mean, 3 definitely feels like a lot. Very frequently, I'm like, I can survive maybe 2 hits, but definitely not 3.
If you make it 1 durability and they Shadow Step Draka and they do it all over again, they're still going to get the same result. So,
yeah, so I would imagine something like that. In terms of buffs, it's really hard to say just because there's so many levers and they've never adjusted number of runes or corpse cost before.
Okay.
So it's
so then instead of what you think they're going to do, what's the one buff you'd like them to do? You call up Deck Tech, you say, Deck Tech, I have this card. You're going to make 1 buff for me. Here it is.
I mean, I think an interesting one would be the Marrow Manipulators to 2 Frost instead of 3, because then you can fuel them with corpses from Unholy. But
And clear the board.
Yeah.
I like it. Final question. Is there a Reno Death Knight deck that we haven't found yet? And 2, if not, why did they even put Reno in the core set?
Because they wanted to put the Explorers in. I don't know.
Yeah, like I love the League of Explorers, but they have been in and out of Hearthstone so much, I feel like the last 3-4 years. Like genuinely, I love them, but I feel like we've seen them in variation too much. Like they can figure something else out, I'm sure.
Oh,
Well, and Bran has been the problem.
just a little
was gonna
bit.
say-
He's only part of some degenerate stuff.
I wouldn't mind if they. I don't mind if they reiterate. I mean, how many Deathwings have they made? I don't care if they give us Bran the drunk or something, but give us something different. I think Bran is, and there was an interesting thread where Cora basically was kind of hinting at, by the way, Bran will rotate with Core. That's what she said, not in so many words. And people just were like, well, why not now? And it's like, oh, come on. People just get on her. It's just like, she just told you basically some free information that Bran's going away. Accept it, be happy, and move on. Now, Earthen Scales can be nuked from orbit. I don't care if they scrub that card from the game. But I to your point, Doc, I think they latch onto them because they were really the first Hearthstone created content that became kind of canon. They've even found their way into WoW, And I wouldn't mind like Down and Tamer Brand was a fun card. I don't know. It took him forever to get nerfed. But he did no wrong. I don't care if they come out next year and say, here's our next iteration of our Explorers. That's fine for me, as long as it's not Bran again. Kill Bran.
Kitty.
Yeah, we see the kitty.
Oh, indeed. Oh, she's here to mess up my mic.
All right. Well, I think we were a little worried. We're like, well, how are we going to fill the show? Because we don't have to interview you again. But wow, we've made it over an hour here. And hopefully next time we have you on, because I'm assuming we can grab you on again at some point. We'll do more deck building talk. Maybe we'll have time, Doc. You won't be baking bread till all hours of the night, and we can get you to also participate.
I really hope so.
Because building the deck for this was a lot of fun, and then kind of with the thought of I'm going to try to make something new, and it's a lot of fun. So I want to get us back on that again. But anyway, Edel, where can people find you?
Well, I'm not doing as much recently since I'm full-time taking care of my nephew, and especially this week I'm working on cosplay, but you can find me on Twitch over at twitch.tv/EdelweissTCG. I also, I guess my primary content currently is Twitter, not as much as Hat, but and that's at Swagoy Edelweiss. And yeah, hoping to do more streams. Going into the new year, I just kind of need to find a new rhythm, since I can't just stream during the day on Tuesday and Thursday anymore. I have to set aside a time in the evening.
And this is public news now, so you're only going to have a little window of time to invest, because you're going to be quite busy in a few months.
Well, 9 or so.
Congratulations. So, Edel, if you want to give that news.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so the projected due date is something like August 6th. So I suspect I will be very busy initially, and then we'll sort of figure out a new rhythm again. But at that point, I will no longer be taking care of my nephew, just be taking care of that little one. And whatever my sleep schedule ends up being, I should be able to find some time to stream. My housemates are willing to put in some time, and then, we've got grandparents to help out as well, so...
Nice. So, Doc, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Twitch at Doc McButt. And Tito, how about you?
I can't even speak. At Tito Santana HS. You can also email the show at breadandbutterhs@gmail.com. So far, it's been fairly quiet on the email front, so if you want to send us an email, we might read it on the show. Anybody you'd like to shout out today, Doc?
Edelweiss, thank you so much for coming back onto the show and letting us pick your brain and discuss how good or how we can improve with deck building. It does feel nice to be able to have someone as a prominent figure of the community as you to be willing to come back more than once to our little show. So thank you.
I think he means slum it down here with us. How about yourself, Edel? Is there anybody you'd like to shout out or anything you'd like to pimp or promote today?
You know what? I would just like to shout out my teammate Lost. Just been thinking about him a lot over in Ukraine. He's, pushing through, but it's still rough over there in Kyiv. So, thinking of you, Lost.
Enough. And I'd like to this week thank Blister Guy, who was nice enough to not only listen to our show, but give us some feedback on it. And for such a prominent figure of the community to just kind of reach out, unabated, it was really nice. I think that's about it. But Edel, one final thought. If there was an archetype or if there's something you think that hasn't been quite discovered yet out there, and you want to suggest something that people could try to build to not break the meta, or something that you think that it would be fun challenge to try to make work that could possibly work. You got anything for them?
Fun challenge. Well, I guess we'll see what they end up doing in terms of balance, but I've wondered about a double unholy, and I don't know if you would do Frost for card draw, but then you've got Stitch Giants and Corpse Bride and Sea Giant, and you just kind of you make 8/8s and then you play Battleground Battlemaster and get them. So more of like I guess not quite hand lock, but just like giants, giants Death Knight. Probably too greedy to run Lorthamar on, but that they're 16/16s. I mean, it's just massive.
They might be too greedy, but that's never stopped us before. All right, everybody, I think we're toast. Thanks for stopping by.
Slide two brothers meet one another when they slide up to the mic. It's bread and butter with one another. Let's start up that recording light.